This is the Ear Science Podcast, the science of healthy hearing.
Hello and welcome to the Ear Science Podcast, the science of healthy hearing, proudly presented by Ear Science Institute Australia, a world-renowned medical research institute based in Western Australia. In this podcast, we'll bring you into our world, the world of ear and hearing science. Two-time Big Brother winner Reggie Bird will share her story of being diagnosed with Usher Syndrome, a rare but debilitating genetic condition which is the leading cause of deaf-blindness. She is pushing for greater awareness and support for research to find treatments or a cure. Principal Research Fellow, Scientist Dr. Elaine Wong and Surgeon Scientist Professor Marcus Atlas will share their latest breakthroughs in the research on Usher Syndrome and their work to unlock a treatment or a cure for the genetic causes of hearing loss.
My name is Dan Vandermeer.
And I'm Lisa Kutsia, and we are your podcast hosts.
Lisa, this is our final episode for Season 2, and it brings us really to the heart of why we do what we do here at Ear Science.
That's right, Dan. We are dedicated to improving the lives of people with ear and hearing disorders through patient-driven research, education, and treatment. People are at the centre of everything we do. The research we are doing in this area of genetics is happening in our laboratory at a cellular level, but the impact for people with hearing loss is potentially huge, building our understanding of the genetic causes of hearing loss, bringing us closer to a possible cure. I was privileged to chat earlier with Reggie Bird. You may know her as the two-time Big Brother winner. She is a mum of two amazing kids, and she's battling some medical challenges and has recently been diagnosed with Usher Syndrome. Here's Reggie. Okay, Reggie, wow, I'm so excited to speak to you today. Two-time winner of Big Brother. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Thank you, Reggie. Reggie, as a public figure, we are also privileged that you actually have shared your health journey with us and your health challenges, and you've recently been diagnosed with Usher Syndrome. Can you tell us a little bit more about this diagnosis?
Yeah, well, it came as a shock, actually. So I had my DNA taken over 13 years ago now. I did a story with 60 Minutes and had my DNA done. They were doing a story on my retinitis pigmentosa. And then out of the blue, I had this phone call from the DNA bank in Western Australia. And they said, we've found your genetic link. And I'm like, oh, wow. So they said to me I had to go back to my ophthalmologist. They couldn't tell me over the phone what it was. And I was so excited because I've been looking out, for things overseas to try and get treatment for my eyesight, genetic treatment for my eyes. So, that day I was so excited. And then when they said I had Usher's, I just burst into tears. I was devastated because I knew what that was, which is going to be going deaf and blind. And it, to me at the time was just the worst news that I could have had given to me. And now, over the last few, it's been that was back in October when I got told. I have since processed that, and I'm just like, I've got to make the most of everything in life now, even more,
Yes.
As well as, going blind and deaf. But I'm hopeful, there's things on the horizon. Like there's always something out there that's happening. So,
Reggie, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And Ear Science Institute Australia, as a medical research institute, everything we do is informed by people. So you sharing your story and the impact that the diagnosis of Usher Syndrome has had, really becomes that sort of beacon towards what we work towards, so that we know why we're doing it. Usher Syndrome is the leading cause of deaf-blindness or the genetic deaf-blindness. So it's such an important area for us to work on. But if we're just working on the syndrome or the condition, it's harder to stay focused. It's for people that we're doing this. So having your story be the foundation of the research that we do is so powerful.
Oh, look, even when I was diagnosed and it hit the media big time, like, because Rod, my mate Rod, we sat down and we did a little video talking about what happened. And it made the news in America. Like, it made the New York New York Post, and there was another one, big one over in America, People magazine.
Yes.
Picked it up. But a lot of people did not know what Usher's is, and they're like, "What is this?" And it was so good to actually get that out there as well, because a lot of people do not know what Usher syndrome is.
Raising awareness is so important. So and I say it again, it's so powerful for you to take the public figure that you have to raise the awareness and to show people it's okay to talk about it and to do something about it.
Oh, definitely. And I'm so, lucky, not lucky, but proud to be in this position to be able to spread awareness, because all the years that I've been raising awareness, it's either about retinitis pigmentosa, blindness, slow vision, or for instance, my son, Lucas, he has cystic fibrosis. So I've been a big campaigner as well, trying to raise awareness for that as well. And now I've got Usher syndrome to raise awareness about that now. So,
Reggie, maybe for our listeners that don't know what Usher syndrome is, what have you learned about Usher syndrome? Can you give us a little bit of an overview?
Well, I've learned that there's 3 types of Ushers. Is that correct? Yeah, I've got Usher's 2A, which I think's in the middle. You've got one that's more severe than the other. I'm still learning about it. Some are born with the deaf-blind, and then I've been diagnosed later on in life. So I'm hoping that my hearing will stay. It's stable because it's stable at the moment.
Fantastic. And so, Reggie, you've had your hearing tested and everything, and that's normal?
Yes. So I went to Hearing Australia, and they said it's quite good at the moment, which is good.
Fantastic, and just to keep that monitoring. But what I'll get back to is, what is Usher syndrome? Later on in this episode, we'll hear from surgeon scientist Professor Marcus Atlas and Dr. Elaine Wong. They are both specialists in this area of research. What they are looking at is at the model of Usher syndrome to understand the causes of Usher syndrome, and that will really allow us to find the treatments as well as even a cure for Usher syndrome.
Sweet. Yes. Yeah, it was a big shock, when I did get diagnosed. So, and after speaking with you guys, I'm feeling there's hope out there.
Yeah, and Reggie, I was going to ask that, what does it mean to you, to you with Usher syndrome and the other people that you've met with Usher syndrome, for the knowing that there's research being done in this area?
Oh, look, because at the start I had no idea, because all I was focused on was retinitis pigmentosa, and I was just, looking up everything possible to get some kind of treatment happening, which is a lot happening overseas. And then I did have a man contact me, a guy in Victoria. His son has Usher's, and he got in touch with me, and he was just so lovely, and he said, "Reggie, there's hope out there. There's things happening," and I'm actually then got in touch with this other man, Brett Corbell, who's a doctor up in Brisbane. I'm looking at starting clinical trials.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah. So I've just recently had cataract surgery done back in October. Oh gosh, but I've had a few complications over the last few months with my eyes. So as soon as I get the all clear whether I can do these clinical trials, I'll be starting them for Usher syndrome.
quite amazing where technology is going, isn't it, Reggie?
Yeah. And I'm hoping I get the good pill and not the placebo. So,
That's the thing, isn't it, with research?
yeah, with research, you don't know what you're going to get. Yeah.
Reggie, so it's been some time since you've had that diagnosis. How is everything going currently? What has been the impact on your life, and maybe what changes have you made?
Well, funny you ask that question. I'm on the the NDIS, the National Disability Insurance Scheme, and we've put in a change of circumstance application to now try and see if I can get some help with having ushers and more things put in place for the future. But they turned around and said that I don't have enough proof that I have ushers. And I'm like, well, what more proof do you need? Like, it's your DNA results.
Wow, Reggie.
Yeah. So I'm just in the middle of dealing with that at the moment. So, I'm getting things put in place for the blindness, and I'm just like, oh, now I need to start looking at, for when my hearing's going to go, what's out there. But they said they don't have enough. Don't have enough proof, and I just don't know what more proof they want.
What more proof they need? And a big part of managing Usher syndrome is planning for the future. Because it's almost like you get this diagnosis, you know exactly what's going to happen. So you get this time to plan for it. So it's so important that you have that in place. Reggie, it probably would be good to get in contact with an audiologist, because and I guess optometrists and ophthalmologists to support your application with NDIS. Because they would be able to talk not just about the diagnosis, but the long-term impact and the importance of putting things in place now.
Yeah, because they got the audiologist's report from when I went to Hearing Australia. They've got the DNA letter and so forth. But they just said that wasn't enough. So I'm like, well, I've got to get things put in place for the future. And the funny thing is, like, this was 13 years ago when I had that DNA testing done. So I already had ushers back then, which I didn't know. So it's not as if it's just come on me. I'm born with it.
Well, so there's still, NDIS is such a wonderful system, but it still needs work to be able to recognise conditions like ushers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and
so hopefully I'll be a voice. Hopefully I'll be a voice for that as well, like to help people.
Yeah, that will be really powerful, Reggie.
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier Professor Atlas and Dr. Wong are doing research on Usher syndrome, understanding the causes of Ushers for the aim of finding a cure, finding treatments for Usher syndrome. What would you say to the researchers at Ear Science Institute Australia and our collaborators?
I would say thank you so much for doing what you do, and it's so wonderful to have people like you in the world that are passionate to try and find cures for these syndromes that we have. Without you, nothing would be getting done. So thank you so much.
And Reggie, it's so rare, Usher syndrome as well. So I'm sure it's often a condition that could be overlooked, and research be done on other areas. So it's so important that we get this message out to our researchers to really show the impact that they are going to have, and that the importance of them to continue with this passion that they have.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And again, like a lot of things have happened with me in my life, and I guess maybe like everything happens for a reason. Maybe, I've got all these things that have happened to me to be a voice as well for people.
It's just so wonderful, Reggie, that you are still so optimistic and seeing the positive in everything that you do. And are you able to take that mindset through your everyday? You've obviously got a very busy life.
Oh, goodness me. Just like at the start, like when I was diagnosed, like straight away, Like I was really, really upset. And I'm like, right, I've got to grab this life with two hands and make the most of it and start my bucket list because that's, I want to get out there and do as much as I can. But over Christmas, I've sort of been feeling really flat and thinking probably too much. I've been thinking a lot about it all and what the future holds, and then your mind just starts spiraling out of control. And then I'm like, nah, stop, snap out of it, you need to get back on track and stop worrying and start being more hopeful. So I do have days, where you feel like crap and you're like, oh, what if? But yeah, I need to turn that back around and get back on track again. So we're all human. We all have our ups and downs, but I'll be okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Reggie. And yeah, it's so important to focus on the things that you do have an impact on, and work through those days where, and I guess work with people to get the support you need on the days when it does get a bit harder.
Yeah, because it's like a lot of people go through so much stuff in life, and I always think, oh, there's always someone worse off. There's always someone worse off, but If and a lot of people ask me, questions like, Reggie, how do you stay so positive? But you just got to get on with it. That's what I do. I just get on with life.
Thank you so much for joining us today and bringing awareness to Usher Syndrome, Reggie. How can the listeners connect with you?
You can follow me on Instagram, which is Reggie Bird BB. And also I'm on Facebook, which is Reggie Bird as well. I'm on Twitter as well as BB Reggie. It's all Big Brother stuff. But that's how people know who I am.
That's exactly right.
Follow me. So once this is out there, I'll be sharing it, and hopefully everyone tunes in and gets some insight into Usher Syndrome.
Thank you, Reggie.
No problem. Thank you.
We just really want to thank Reggie for sharing her story so candidly. She really does bring home, for me, the importance of raising awareness for genetic conditions such as Usher syndrome and to support researchers who are working to find a cure.
You're exactly right, Dan. And today we are fortunate to be joined by two of those researchers from Ear Science Institute Australia, Principal Research Fellow Scientist Dr. Elaine Wong, and Surgeon Scientist and Director of Ear Science Institute Australia, Professor Marcus Atlas. Dr. Wong and Professor Atlas are part of the world-leading research team developing gene therapy to repair and regenerate hearing. This has the potential to help people with hearing loss all over the world, including Reggie and others with Usher syndrome. Elaine and Marcus, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting us.
Marcus, we just heard from Reggie, who's just been recently diagnosed with Usher syndrome. How did you feel listening to Reggie's story?
Well, it was wonderful, Dan. It's really important when patients with Usher or patients with any ear disorder involve themselves in the work we do at Ear Science Institute Australia, and everything we do is focused on our patients. So having people like Reggie involved and helping us with our research is everything.
Can you tell us a little bit about Usher syndrome? What is it? What do you know about the causes of Usher syndrome?
Okay, Usher is a rare genetic cause of hearing loss, and most of the genetic causes of hearing loss are in fact rare, but Usher is rare. It's an autosomal recessive syndromic condition, which means that both parents can carry the gene and that can be transferred to one of their children, but both of the parents aren't affected by the disorder. So that's autosomal recessive. So that's an important one, and it's the more common type of genetic type of hearing loss. But in Usher, it's a specific group of genes that we are particularly interested in. It creates 3 different types of Usher syndrome, and they manifest differently. I can tell you a little bit more. Usher 1 is associated with a profound both-sided deafness and balance dysfunction at birth. That's not what we're talking about with Reggie. Retinitis pigmentosa becomes apparent usually after the age of 10 in Usher 1. In Usher 2, there's a moderate to severe hearing loss at birth with normal balance function and retinitis pigmentosa that manifests later, usually in the teenage years. And the final one, Usher 3, has normal to near normal balance function and a progressive hearing loss. And retinitis pigmentosa usually manifests later in the teenage years. So you can see there's 3 different types. There's a bit of overlap, and so often it's not easy for us to be exactly sure which genes involved, but they're the major types. And you'll hear in a moment about how Elaine is working on those genes, understanding how those genes cause hearing loss, and then maybe being able to modify those genes. So could you imagine being able to treat both the hearing loss and the blindness?
It'd be amazing. Yeah, we actually told Reggie that we'd promised to get a scientific answer from some very learned people about that. So thank you, Marcus.
So, Marcus, we know 1 in 6 people experience hearing loss, 1 in 4 when we look at people over the age of 65. So hearing loss is very common. Can you tell us why Ear Science, the research team at Ear Science, has focused more closely on Usher syndrome, which is relatively rare, like you said?
We've concentrated on Usher because it's a genetic cause of hearing loss, but it's an example of what we can do. It represents a model for which we can base our treatments and understanding of hereditary hearing loss. And the really cool thing is because we are seeing in the adult age group, we always knew that 50 or 60% of kids had hereditary hearing loss. But what we didn't know is that in patients who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s and 80s, that group of patients who I've always suspected had a genetic component to their hearing loss because they weren't age or noise-related hearing loss. They manifested differently. They had a different type of loss. It was progressive, and it clearly wasn't age-related, even though everybody talked about age as being the dominant factor. Well, what's being found by absolutely some fantastic research in Japan, actually, of a friend of mine who's found that at least half of those patients have a genetic predisposition to their progressive age-related hearing loss. So this means that Elaine's work on trying to understand where those genes impact on hearing loss and maybe ways to modify those genes opens up a whole new way of being able to treat progressive hearing loss in adults that is now requiring powerful hearing aids or cochlear implants. So it's really, really interesting and important.
Well, Marcus, it's interesting you say that because we've been talking about Usher syndrome, but you've mentioned that there are other types of hearing loss that may be genetic. We had a perfect example of that recently. One of our listeners, Fred, wrote to us that his father had become deaf in one ear after a certain age, and so has he. He asked about research and treatments for inherited hearing loss. Can you give some examples of those other genetic causes of hearing loss, and can you please help explain for our listeners how the Usher model may help to find a cure for hearing loss more generally?
Well, Fred's onto it because he realised that his father had this progressive high-frequency nerve-related hearing loss that was getting worse and worse and seemed to be more than you would expect for age. And that's exactly right. It is more than you would expect for age. He's likely to have one of these genes that I was just talking about that's caused a hereditary progressive loss, and add that to his age-related loss and add that to some noise exposure that he's had in his life. And here we have this sort of potent brew of progressive, powerful, significant hearing loss that we struggle with in terms of treatment. We struggle because hearing aids are often not powerful enough or can't deal with the abnormalities of speech discrimination. And we are thinking about cochlear implants for many of those patients in our group here at Ear Science. So we realize that if we can unlock the understanding of these genes, if Elaine can discover these genes and modify these genes in the various ways that we'll talk about, this really does unlock a whole new way of being able to treat patients like this in a much more successful fashion. So it's understanding and then potentially treatment.
Elaine, Marcus has referenced the research that you have been doing on the Usher's model. Can you tell us, is this a new area of research? How long has the Institute been working on it, and who are you collaborating with?
That's a very good question. We have been working with Lion's Eyes Institute since 2018, And Marcus introduced Associate Professor Fred Chen and Senior Scientist Sam to me, and we start working together. And we collect the Usher Syndrome patient skin cells and convert them into retinal eye cells and also inner ear cells.
Marcus, you want to add something?
Yeah, I want to tell
Please
you.
add.
I'm going to tell you. See, because Elaine makes it sound like it's something you do,
Like just,
on the way,
just on
making
the
your lunch.
weekend.
on the way to work. Yeah.
I know.
And but what she did is just unbelievable. What she's done is turned a skin cell. This is technology that she'll tell you about has been around for a while. But turning a skin cell into a stem cell and then coaching this stem cell to become a hair cell with this Usher gene affecting it. It's really groundbreaking work. So she's there tending these cells day in and day out every weekend and making and doing things that other people in the world have never been able to do. So it's really, truly spectacular stuff, but she makes it sound so easy.
Just so humble, Elaine. I mean, come on. Elaine, you're clear, we mentioned before, you're the principal research fellow and the scientist leading the team doing this incredible work. We've been talking about genetics and inherited conditions, but can you break it down a bit further for us? How do you and your team do this in the lab? How do you unlock the genetics of hearing loss?
I have been studying the inner ear genetics for about 20 years in Australia, Hong Kong, and United States. From what we discovered, we have identified the key factors to drive the inner ear hair cells and neural cell development. As I said, I joined Ear Science Institute Australia in 2017 and is grateful to have multiple funding bodies, Pass and William Foundation, STEM Parent Charitable Foundation, Channel 7 Telephone Trust, NHMRC, and MRFF funds help fund this vital research. Using the Nobel Prize winning method, we can take human skin cells and chemically transform and reprogram them into pluripotent stem cells, which means we can turn them into all types of cells we want. We are converting this into the cells that make up the cochlea, which is the hearing organ. This is called inner ear organoid. Hearing Therapeutic Laboratory at Ear Science Institute Australia is one of only 3 labs in the world who have been able to generate patient-specific inner ear cells in the laboratory.
Jeez.
In our ear science laboratory, we grow this into inner ear organoids. We can use these organoids to test drugs, treatments, and therapies to cure hearing loss. So we are getting closer to curing hearing loss with personalized treatment so we can all hear well and live well.
That's fantastic. That is awesome.
So, Elaine, can you tell me more about why having this organoid in the lab in a petri dish, why that's so important?
The organoid culture takes 6 months up to 1 year to grow the inner ear organoid. When it's grown, we can use it to test drug therapy or gene therapies to see what works and what doesn't work.
These organoids are really cool, Dan. So what it is, it's like a 3-dimensional model of your cochlea. So Elaine can take your skin cell and she can turn it into your stem cell with your genetic code and create your cochlea. And so, which is different to mine.
Yeah.
And then she can and use that for experiments on a hearing loss that you may or may not have or various other things associated with your cells and your genetic code. And so you can imagine that now that we've got something that isn't an animal model anymore and all the awful things about having to work on animals in the future, and being able to work on not only human models, but specific human models. So your inner ear can be experimented on. So it's really truly something that we think is going to be hugely exciting, just the idea of having an organoid and being able to do things to it, but then what can we do with it and how can we test drugs and genes and new treatments and molecules and even transplants to treat hearing loss. And of course, there's organoids in other parts of the body, so brain and kidney and liver, isn't there, Elaine? So this organoid thing is really becoming a big deal in science.
And this kind of research could translate to that other,
So Elaine, if we let her, we don't want to let her, but she could make a brain organoid, or she could potentially make all sorts of other things, and her colleagues around the world are doing just that.
Well, you're right. That is very cool. That is very cool. Elaine, what sort of drugs or treatments have you been testing, and what have you been able to learn from those tests?
Our team have been working on a solution to regrow hair cell in the inner ear. Our research has led to an international patent. We are ready to use this to proceed to research using inner ear organoids on a larger scale. So our drug development will be focused on optoprotection drugs, which can prevent hearing loss as a result of noise and drugs. Secondly, we can focus on drugs related to auto-regeneration. That's all drugs can related to treat hearing loss. And third category, we will work on gene correction using genetic engineering method to correct or replace the gene mutation.
Wow.
It's complicated. And so, it's 3 separate subjects, but they're all big deals and they're all hard work. And we have to find funding for all of this, and we have to find people and collaborations to make sure that each one of these components of the projects move ahead. And we've been funded by some big MRFF and NHMRC, which of course are national government-related funding bodies that have been very generous, because these are really good grants, and Elaine's written some spectacular grants with her collaborators. So there's a real chance of pushing these things along, I think.
Marcus, as an audiologist, we always get asked, is there a cure for hearing loss? And you mentioned earlier that maybe these organoids would actually be able to use and be transplanted. So will you be able to implant it for somebody who's got a cochlea that's damaged, use these organoids?
Well, we were just talking about this last week, and Elaine and I probably don't, I don't know, you can speak, but about this. But I think the transplant side of things, I think, is the least likely way that we'll be able to regenerate hearing. I think the more likely possible way is the things that Elaine has mentioned. That is drugs, diets, molecules, genes that will modify these abnormal genes causing hearing loss as being a method to treat hearing loss, rather than creating a new cochlea and putting it inside somebody and expecting it to hook up to all of the important parts of the ear and stay alive and doing all these million things that transplantation requires in this sort of circumstance. So I know we're not really sure, but I think it's the former that has the greatest potential benefit. But that's still a cure for hearing loss. That's exactly what we're trying to do. So finding its place is still happening, I think. What do you think, Elaine?
Yes, agree, Marcus. We can grow patient cells in the dish, and as I said, using genetic engineering to correct patient's mutation gene and put the correct cell back into patient's cochlea to restore hearing loss. That is our long-term goal.
That is so powerful, really powerful. Marcus, there are likely to be listeners to this episode, like Fred, who wrote into us, who may have or may be experiencing hearing loss. It may be caused by genetic or other factors. Keeping in mind this amazing, groundbreaking research, what would you recommend to those listeners today?
Well, today at Ear Science Institute Australia and many places in our country and the world, we have access to all sorts of hearing technology to help people with hearing loss. And so people with any type of hearing loss in our community can get access to the most wonderful treatments. We won't cure their hearing loss, but we'll be able to treat them very effectively. So people with mild to moderate to sloping high-frequency severe hearing losses will be treated with conventional hearing aid technology, what we call air conduction hearing aids, and they are wonderful. Modern hearing aid technology just will revolutionize the lives of people with high frequency or any types of hearing loss. And then as the hearing loss worsens and they get more significant problems with word understanding and the understanding of speech and words, they'll consider the possibility of implantable hearing devices. And most of us know about cochlear implantation. And that's one of the better known implantable hearing devices for people with more severe hearing loss. But we're seeing more and more patients who are in that grey zone between hearing aids and cochlear implants who will gain significant benefit from cochlear implants earlier in their journey of hearing loss. And then we've got a group of other implantable hearing devices for what we call conductive or middle ear type hearing losses, which could occur in some types of syndromal genetic hearing losses. They have these what we call conductive or middle ear hearing losses, and for them, implantable devices like bone conduction implants can be just revolutionize their hearing. So modern hearing aid technology and hearing technology is truly spectacular. And so people who are listening, who have got hearing loss, should find out about their hearing losses and should look for treatment, even for the mildest hearing loss, because there's enormous quality of life benefits to be gained for them. So what we've talked about today are these really unbelievable new potential ways to cure or to really modify pediatric or adult genetic hearing losses. But at the moment, there are lots of ways to improve quality of life for anybody with hearing loss.
Dan, that's really been the theme, is don't delay it. You know, if you've got hearing loss, act now.
Yes.
And it's fantastic to know that people are working behind the scenes on finding a cure, but we can't delay addressing hearing loss today.
Yeah, it absolutely blows my mind that this world-leading research is happening right here in WA. So thank you both.
Marcus, earlier this season, we spoke to Dorinda Cox, the Green Senator, and she shared with us that she's got otosclerosis. Can you please let us know the causes of otosclerosis and the treatment?
Yeah, sure. It's a genetic cause of hearing loss, and it's a bone disorder of the ear only. So it doesn't affect any other bones in the body, and it particularly affects the stapes bone. So there's three little ossicles, three little bones in the middle ear, and they conduct the sound from the eardrum to the inner ear: the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. And the stapes, or the stirrup bone, can be affected by this disorder of otosclerosis, which is a genetic disorder, an autosomal recessive genetic disorder. So it runs in families. It's more common in women than men. And it occurs typically in women in the childbearing age group, so that their hearing can often worsen during pregnancy. And that's when they might first notice the hearing loss, where they get this conductive or middle ear type hearing loss due to the stapes bone being affected by this bone disorder that fixes the stapes bone and causes the hearing loss. So the hearing loss gradually progresses during their adult life. It can be combined with some inner ear or nerve-related hearing loss. So it can be this combination of inner ear nerve hearing loss and the stapes hearing loss. So this gradually progresses in one or both ears over time, and then they may require treatment, and often require treatment. So in the earlier stages, there might be a minor loss that requires no treatment, and then as it worsens, they'll consider either a hearing aid or a stapedectomy. And the stapedectomy is a replacement of the stapes bone with a tiny piston called a stapes piston, where you actually replace the fixed bone of the stapes with this piston. So that's an operative procedure that is very successful in improving the conductive or middle ear component. But hearing aids are also very successful in the management of otosclerosis. And then as it worsens, as it does in some patients, they get a markedly worsened inner ear or nerve component over usually decades of having otosclerosis, and they may even get to a cochlear implant later on in the far advanced stages of otosclerosis. So that's in very quickly the management of otosclerosis, but it is one of the genetic. There is a genetic component to this disorder of otosclerosis.
Marcus, for anyone listening who wants to find out more about this work or wants to be a part of finding a cure for conditions like Usher syndrome, what can they do?
Dan, there's lots of things they can do. They should think about, if they can, to be part of our Gift of Hearing campaign. And any donation is going to be wonderful for us in terms of hearing-related research. And we've had some wonderfully helpful philanthropists involved in the Gift of Hearing. They can express their interest to be involved in future studies, and we've got all sorts of clinical studies in the areas of hearing loss that they might involve themselves in, and so they can find that out on our website. And they can follow us on social media and find out more about the Institute, find out about exciting things that relate to hearing loss and how they might involve themselves. So there's lots of ways at Ear Science to get involved.
Thank you so much, Elaine and Marcus, for your dedication to finding treatments and a cure for Usher syndrome and hearing loss in general.
Thanks, guys.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we are recording this podcast on, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and the land on which you're listening from. We pay respects to Aboriginal elders past, present and emerging. If you've enjoyed this episode, let us know by rating and reviewing this podcast or sharing it with a friend or family member. Make sure you're subscribed so you won't miss an episode. To view this episode as a video with captions, visit the Ear Science YouTube channel or our website www.earscience.org.au/podcast. You can also visit our website to suggest a topic for a future episode, for links to more information and all the research papers on this topic that we have discussed today. This podcast provides information of a general nature and does not constitute medical advice. The producer of the Ear Science podcast, The Science of Healthy Hearing, is Emma Ireland, with sound engineering and editing by myself, Dan Vandermeer.